All right, Eric, Star Trek trivia, go.
Okay. Who is the botanist who fell in love with Spock and later reconnected with him on Omicron Ceti 3? Excuse me. Give you the options. A. Christine Chappell. B. Raina Kapek. C. Leila Kalomi. Or D. Amanda Grayson. But I don't care about other people's feelings. I think you got that tattooed on your back, right? Let's cut this part.
No. This is a piece of the action. I'm Micah.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Greg.
And this week we're going to be looking at Seven Wonders Duel. Before we get into that, though, just a quick reminder, we post new videos on the 1st and the 15th of every month, so remember to check us out. Also, remember to do all the YouTube-y-like stuff, like give us a like, leave us a comment, subscribe, or hit the bell for notifications. Let's go ahead, though, and we'll get right into our review of Seven Wonders Duel. Now, this, I guess you guys were telling me, this is related to Seven Wonders, but it's not an expansion per se. This came out, same designer, it came out in 2015, which was 5 years after the original. So why don't we maybe go to you, Eric, and you can tell us a little bit about the premise of Seven Wonders Duel and if it's any different from, or how it differs from the premise of the original Seven Wonders.
It doesn't differ much. It's the premise itself is the exact same. This is what they would call a re-implementation of the rules of Seven Wonders. So the reason that this exists is it's a faster version of Seven Wonders that only plays 2 players. So it's designed to just be a 2-player game. In fact, that's all that can be played is just 2 players. And it takes the opportunity to tweak the rules a little bit, maybe fixing some stuff that might have been a problem in the first game. Maybe we can get it. I'm sure we'll get into that later. I think that this game improved on some of the features of Seven Wonders, but basically the feel of it is the same. It's a light ancient civilization game that has almost no theme really to it. It's just a card game about set collection and resource management. And but this time you're playing with instead of doing a draft, like in the original Seven Wonders, 7 cards, you get a hand of 7 cards and you draft one and then you pass it around and everybody drafts all their cards and that's an age. Well, in this, there's I don't know if you can see that very well, but these are, actually, there's a picture on the back that's much better. Here we go. So every age is a different kind of solitaire looking kind of thing, where that starts off with this one, and you start taking cards from some of the cards are face up, some of them are face down, and you are able to draft those cards. You take turns taking cards off of that structure that you build, and then this is age 2, and then this is age 3, and after that, whoever has the most points wins.
Okay, so maybe a question for both of you then, because something I remember from our review of the original Seven Wonders was, correct me if I'm wrong, because we're going off of my notoriously bad memory here, but that was one that I think a feature of it, or a good thing about it, was the simultaneous play. Since everybody was sort of looking at the hand and passing, was that even at a high player count, you always stayed engaged. So it would seem like, on one hand, I could say, well, it seems like maybe it would not benefit as much from going down to a 2-player count. Normally, a benefit of going to a lower player count is at least you would be more engaged because you'd have a turn every other time, but that doesn't seem like a problem in the original. So when you guys are thinking about the rules tweaks, do you feel like those were fixes to Seven Wonders in general, or just specific targeted changes that really are only applicable to the 2-player game?
I think it's 2-player only. I think you bring up a good point, like, because it's not simultaneous anymore, but you don't need it to be simultaneous in a 2-player game because the turns are so quick. So they jettison that simultaneous play thing and and replace it with a much more, in my opinion, much more interesting mechanic of this solitaire-like structure that you can see half of, and half of it's covered up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to make some choices, but those choices are real fast. You only have, like at any given moment, you only have like 3 or 4 cards maybe that you can choose to draw.
Okay.
And I think it's an interesting thing to talk about here is I always felt that 2-player games are a very different beast to design for than other player counts. And this is going to come up a few times in this review that I want to talk about. But when you get to a 2-player game, it gets kind of zero-sum-ish. It's not. I don't think it's zero-sum in the mathematical sense, but you get to the point where everything that I do to hurt you helps me, and I think that changes the design possibilities. 7 Wonders. So a lot of games that play a lot of player counts, 2 players often the worst count, in my opinion, because I feel 2-player requires a different design. The original 7 Wonders actually had a 2-player count in it, but it wasn't really that good. And it requires doing things like having a dummy hand. A lot of games would do that. So they took the idea like, well, if we were to design 7 Wonders for a 2-player game, what could we do with it? And that's what this feels like to me. You couldn't do this with more than 2 players, I don't think. So I don't necessarily think they were taking the opportunity to fix things, but I think maybe there's some of that. But I think what's also is just designing it for the interesting and unique situation of 2-player only games, which a lot of games have been doing lately. This is kind of a common thing where they take bigger games and design a specific one for 2 players. Codenames, for example, we reviewed that. They have Codenames Duet. These are 2-player only Codenames. There's a lot of games that's
the
done that.
smallest rules change ever in any reimplementation I've ever seen.
Well, it's a co-op.
That. Yes, but it's it's a bizarre little tweak. There's one extra token that you use and one extra rule, and basically that now you can play Codenames as a co-op.
So that sounds like then maybe that's a smart thing to do if 2-player is such a different animal than 3-player and above to just try to totally reinvent it. And it sounds like, I guess that's what you guys mean then when you're using that word reimplementation. Is that what you'd say you mean by it? That sort of going back and saying if we were designing this game again but with a slightly different target, such as the restriction being that there's exactly a 2-player player count, that kind of thing. That's what a reimplementation is, as far as
I think that was the motivation for them doing this. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Plus, anything they put 7 Wonders on makes them money. So,
well,
of course.
Yes, of course.
I think at the end of the day, it's a marketing decision. But I do also think. Yes.
You mean what's his name? You mean Bowser and Cathala here aren't complete altruists?
Well, I mean, it's of all the potential marketing decisions they could have made, of all the different, I mean, they could have made a specific one that's just for 50 players, right?
True.
But so they picked one. They picked the 2-player one for a reason. Okay.
Yeah, it's a popular player count nowadays, especially. Player games. So.
Pandemic with husbands and wives stuck at home together.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say it's great for that kind of thing.
Right. Okay. Cool.
I will say with the theme-wise, I do agree that it's just as dry as the first one. Although I will say that it's ever so slightly more, just because the military, which we'll talk about, is a bit more aggressive feeling.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it feels a little more military-ish. But if we're just talking about the feel of the theme, I'll say it's slightly above where the original 7 Wonders was. But
yeah, well,
I also want to say that there is the theme is so you can build the Great Library of Alexandria.
Yeah.
But you can also build the pyramids of Egypt and the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I mean, all of those things are possible to be done with one player can do all those things. So the theme is just light ancient civilizations without it. You never feel like you're anybody in particular.
I assume that since this is 2-player, though, we're carving the world in half. So yes, we could have the Great Pyramids and Alexandria because we're just
right. Okay.
Our empire
Reaganeric,
encompasses
the rulers of the world.
That's right.
As it should be.
Sure. So Greg, why don't we go ahead and get into that a little further then, and talk more about specifically how it feels to play, and the differences you noticed in it being, you alluded to the one with the military. How does this feel to play, and how does it feel different if it does?
Yeah, it does feel different. So Eric actually just mentioned the two designers, Antoine Bauza, Bruno Catala. So Bruno Catala actually joined this project. I believe the original was just Bauza by himself. Bruno Catala is not a designer we have reviewed yet. However, for me, what I've played with his games so far, when it comes to light family games, he's kind of my go-to designer. I think he's one of my favorite light game designers.
What else has he done that we would?
Mission Red Planet. He's done Raptor. He's done Mr. Jack. Okay. He's got tons of games under his belt. He's a pretty prolific designer, but he does something that's interesting in games. He creates a lot of, at least of the ones that I've played, he's good at creating drama without relying on randomness, and instead he tends to focus on player-driven chaos. Like he creates big sweeping moments without it being random. It's just that the player's decisions are hard to read out. Let's put it that way. So I don't think this game is 100% that, but I can tell his contribution. It's a little streak of that of Bruno Catala in here that I can sense. So I don't think it's as out there as like his Mission Red Planet just feels super chaotic, but it's hardly any randomness in that game. So anyways, but I sense that, and I can see it through, for example, the military, which I kind of want to talk about because the military, in my opinion, is vastly improved in this game. In the other game, it was just your compared symbols at the end of each age. And if you didn't, you just lost a point each age if you didn't win your battles. And this one, though, you can win the game 100%. Because the military, just to explain the feature, it's a track that starts in the middle, and every time you collect a symbol, a shield symbol, it moves it closer to the other player's side. And if it gets all the way to the other player's side, they immediately lose the game. So it's kind of a tug of war where you're collecting these symbols and pushing that token back and forth up the track. That's far more interesting to me because it's something you can't ignore. If the other player's going heavy in the military, they would just win the game straight up, no matter how many points that you got. So I think
it's like you guys have divided the globe, and now your militaries are pushing each other. And if he pushes you all the way off the planet, then
Yeah. So that's one design decision I really like. It does for feel of play. That makes it feel military is much more aggressive. It's much more relevant to me. One of the things I like is there are some straight up attacks in this. I don't know if I like it so much, but there's a few straight up attacks in this game, which enhances the interactivity. There's some that I build this wonder, and now you have to discard a resource card of some sort. Also, there's resource cards in the game that the other players can be collecting. So like if they got all the wood over there, in the old game, it just, you paid the player next to you like so many coins to use their symbol. In this game, the more of the resources that your opponent has, that increases the amount of money that you have to pay to the bank for that resource. So there's more interactivity in this game, just through those things alone. Also, the other huge change in this game, as Eric talked about, is the pyramid system. That pyramid structure changes quite a bit. In Seven Wonders, you just had the hand of cards. You know what was in there. You drew the best card for you, and you passed on. This one, though, because the cards flip over, there's a constant decision-making of, I could take this card, but if I do, it's going to flip over the card underneath it, and that's going to give my opponent more choices.
Right.
So that enhances the decision-making. Because it's like, I do want this card, but it's going to give my other player more options. So is it worth that? Or do I take this card that's slightly less in favor for me, but not reveal new cards, and wait for my opponent to take this card and flip with it? You know what I mean? So there's a lot more looking ahead in this game that Seven Wonders didn't necessarily have. Seven Wonders just made the decision based upon the hand you saw, because you had no idea what was coming in the next hand. So I think that's interesting. And also, Eric talked about the pyramid system does keep your choices down, because you only ever have like sometimes one decision to make, up to 4 or 5 cards you can choose from, depending on how the pyramid is being eaten up. So there's that. So I would say the one that kind of boils down to you have to think in sequences in this game. You do have to think a few moves out, which in Seven Wonders I never did. So all of that kind of changes the feel of the play to making it a little more interactive, a little less tactical. You have to think out a little further out, and that's the main changes in feel that I sense.
Yeah, and by less tactical, I think you mean more strategic.
Yeah,
There is tactics still in it, of course, but now that there's these more thinky elements to the game, you are able to plan stuff out more in a strategic way that the original Seven Wonders didn't allow for at all.
Yeah, and I think when I say that, I don't mean it's definitely a tactical game still. I agree, but you are thinking out a few more moves than you were previously. In this game, you can think things out a few moves out.
It's just shifting down the scale a little bit more than the other one.
You have to think, you have to read out potential moves more.
Okay. Eric, what about you? Thoughts on the feel of Seven Wonders Duel?
I think that all the changes that have been made to Seven Wonders Duel have been improvements over Seven Wonders. In the original Seven Wonders, it felt like there wasn't much in the way of choice. It was just take the resources that were there and that were in the hand and move on. There was still a nice sensation at the end of Seven Wonders. It felt like kind of like when your taxes come in at the end of the year and you feel like you didn't really earn it, but here it is. Here's a big bunch of money. That's the way Seven Wonders felt. This feels like you've done something to earn that money. Like you've actually strategically thought through the game, and because of that, the reward, the feel of it is much more rewarding.
You feel like there's a tighter, maybe like a tighter feedback loop between your actions and your consequences?
Yeah, and that feedback loop is somewhat in my control as opposed to just a random draw of 7 cards that gets passed around the table.
Okay. All right, very nice. It sounds like both of you, if you knew it was going to be just 2 people and your choices were between Seven Wonders Duel versus regular Seven Wonders at a 2-person player count, that you'd definitely take the dual version.
Yeah, no
is that right?
question. No question.
Absolutely. I did not like Seven Wonders 2-player count.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, well, let's get into the strategy then. What are some things that a novice new player can think about coming into Seven Wonders Duel for the first time? Eric, you want to start off?
Yeah, so my tips for this game are going to be kind of similar to Seven Wonders with some tweaks. So the first thing that you do is you choose wonders. The wonders are a draft system. So you just get 4 wonders are put out, and the first player chooses 1 wonder, the second player chooses 2 wonders, and the first player chooses the last wonder, and that happens twice. So each of us are going to get 4 wonders.
So a 2-person snake draft.
Yeah, exactly. So when that happens, the wonders that have that symbol on them, can you see that?
The little double arrow circly thing?
Those are the ones you want.
Okay.
So you want those because what they do is they let you take another turn. So those are the ones that have the highest priority in the game. So choose those repeater wonders, and then after that, just kind of a similar flow to original Seven Wonders. When you're actually playing the game, you want to choose in age 1. You want to choose just resource cards. Whenever you can get a brown or gray card, choose those brown and gray cards because those are the resources that are going to let you build other things later. In age 2, do the same thing. Just prioritize resources, but if you've done it right, and there is a bit of luck in this game because the way that those cards are dealt out in the pyramid, it's a pyramid, it's a reverse pyramid, and then it's a diamond. So when I say pyramid, it's just the shapes that those ages get dealt out in. That's solitaire style. But the way those get dealt out, a player can get kind of hosed there because there's just on there when it comes back to them, there's never anything good for them to choose. But for the most part, you have some ways to mitigate that. So in age 2, choose resources, but start looking at your wonders and see if you can afford them, and then start buying those wonders preferably in the second half of age 2. And then in age 3, that's when you just go hog wild on points. So you should have gotten most of your wonders by age 3. The rest of things that happen in age 3 is you can get these guild cards, which are purple cards, which give you huge boosts in points. And you'll be able to afford all of them if things went well in ages 1 and 2. So if the luck of the draw is in your favor, then just do those things and you'll probably win. Choose wonders that have good resources. Buy resources in age 1, buy resources in age 2 and start working on your wonders. And in age 2, buy blue cards, which are the points cards, and buy guild cards, which are huge point bonuses also. I still think that you shouldn't focus too much on, as much as I like what they've done with military and with science, honestly, I think they've improved both of them. I still think that you should just focus on resources and points cards.
Yeah, because correct me if I'm wrong, you guys had a big debate over the importance of the military. Did you not?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. And you can, well, then the thing is like in the original Seven Wonders, you couldn't even win with military. Military was not a valid win condition. It was just possibly, if I'm being generous to Greg's point of view, it was just possibly a tactic that you could use to give yourself a win in a different arena. Well, in this one, you can actually win with military. And I think that, and I've tried that. I've tried to win with just military and with just science. And statistically, I just think that while I think they're much better and less broken than in Seven Wonders Original, your chances of winning are greatly increased if you just stick with point cards. A solid resource focused game.
All right. Greg, what do you think? You agree with that? What are your strategies?
I agree with most of that, so I'm not going to reiterate all that. But yeah, I agree. In the beginning, you want to focus on resource cards. You got to have your nice ground level laid for the future rounds. So don't ignore the resource cards, especially since in this game, the more that your opponents build, it's going to make it more expensive for you. So you can't just let your opponent get all the resource cards. That's just the death of you. But also, it wasn't mentioned, but I think in this game also they've improved. One thing about this game I've noticed is everything has been given more weight. I feel like there's certain things in the original Seven Wonders you could ignore, and one of those, for example, is the gold cards. I think you could get by pretty far in the original Seven Wonders without a lot of those gold cards, but I think gold cards should not be slept on in this game. They do two things. You can always throw away a card to get gold, right? If you need gold, it's 2 points, 2 coins for doing that. Plus 1 point for every gold card you have in your tableau. So the more of those you get, the more coins you're going to get for every time you throw away a card. Plus those gold cards give you stuff. Like for example, maybe I couldn't get the wood resource. But there's a gold card that says now every time you pay for wood, it's only 1 coin for you. Those are pretty valuable, I find, especially if I couldn't get the resource that I needed. So don't sleep on those gold cards. I'll throw that in there. And a third strategic thing to think about is in Seven Wonders, you just took the card that was either best for you, or if you just really wanted to hose one of the other players, you took the card that was worse for them. In this game, the whole pyramid thing adds a whole nother layer of picking cards so that the pyramid gets dissolved in a way that's beneficial to you. Eric talked about luck of the draw. I agree with that when you're playing with players of 2 equal levels who know what they're doing. I think there's there's some randomness there. But I think a better player, especially if you're playing someone that doesn't know what they're doing, you can actually manipulate that pyramid so that they're getting bad choices. You can manipulate that randomness so they feel like, oh, I got hosed over. It's like, no, I chose the cards that way, so they got flipped over at the right times. You can do that. So don't sleep on that either. There's something to the way that you draw the cards. They flip over here. I go on this side of it because I want this side of the pyramid to go up faster or whatever. There's different things you can do for that. So just the way the cards are drafted is a new strategic consideration that wasn't in the first Seven Wonders.
Okay. All right. Very good. So sounds like there's some interesting things to play with there. Let's go ahead and get into the good and the bad, the end of Seven Wonders Duel. First of all, what did Seven Wonders Duel do well? Greg?
Yeah, I mean, Eric said it earlier. I think it pretty much improved everything
Okay.
from the original Seven Wonders. Pretty much. There's just one or two things we'll talk about later, but pretty much everything. The military, I can't stress enough how much more improved that is to me. One thing we didn't talk about, I'll mention it here with the military. Yes, it's a win condition, which in itself is cool. I like alternate victory conditions. But even if you don't win with military, it's still a significant force on the game, which I really enjoy. So, for example, in the last game that Eric and I played, Eric had got that military track really far on my side, so all he needed was one more card and he would have won the game. Now that suddenly limits my choices because I can't just have cards slip over for him because if he gets a military card, he's going to win. So even though I wasn't at a threat to maybe lose militarily, it still affected my decisions. And I think that's kind of neat how that little mechanism, even though it's a win condition, can still change how you play the game because okay, he's going heavy military. I got to do it this way. So it adjusts my flow of the game. I've already talked about it, but I think that pyramid structure just creates much more interesting decisions than the draft of Seven Wonders. It's got a good play time. I think it's 20, 30-minute game, but it's still got some decent meat to it. So that's pretty nice. And just the fact that it's a two-player game, it does allow for those more zero-sum-like decisions, I guess. It's we always talk about in Seven Wonders. I mentioned how it didn't feel very interactive because there's not a lot of advantages to hate drafting in a multiplayer game like Seven Wonders. There's sometimes you want to do it, but let's say I take this card because Bob over there has got all the science cards, and I don't want him getting this one science card. Who makes that decision? If it's me, then yes, maybe I hurt Bob more than I'm hurting myself by not taking a card I could use. So he drops down, and then I drop down a little less, but now we're both dropping down relative speaking to the other players.
Right.
So yes, I hurt Bob more than me, but I also hurt my position among the other players. So therefore, it never feels good to do that, unless you're attacking specifically the leader or something. It just never feels good to do that. But in a two-player game, the advantage here is any decision that I make that hurts Eric, for example, benefits me.
Right.
And that just makes the game a little bit more conflict-driven, which I
think you got that tattooed on your back, right?
What, conflict-driven? What is that?
No, anything that hurts Eric benefits me.
Oh yeah, of course. That's my third rule of.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that's the advantage of the fact that they re-implemented this as a two-player game is you're allowed that more of a aggressive play, which I'm always a big fan of.
Sure. Okay, cool. Eric, what about you? What did you like about Seven Wonders Duel?
Not much to add to that. I don't want to reiterate everything Greg said. I agree with pretty much everything he said. I want to focus in on the speed of the game with the added denseness, the density of the game. Because when I play this game, it can take 20 minutes, maybe 30, but I feel like I've gone through 3 ages. I feel like I've accomplished something. It feels really, really satisfying.
So what you're saying is a full game of Seven Wonders Duel can technically be shorter than a full game of Love Letter.
It could. Well, then a full game of Love Letter? Yes, right. It could. Technically.
The 30-minute version? Yeah.
But you won't be fighting Cthulhu with Churchill.
You will not be. No, that's true.
It's really the same thing.
Yeah, that's gonna be in a Seven Wonders expansion.
That's an expansion, an actual genuine expansion.
Okay.
The Churchill expansion of Seven Wonders Duel. I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to really, really drive that point home that this game is really brief and fast-paced. But man, it feels full of really good tense decisions. And there's a lot of satisfaction at the end of this one. I highly recommend this game. Military finally works. It's good to look at. I don't know. Yeah, just
You dig it.
improvements all the way around. I dig it.
Okay, so what about next? We're going to talk about the bad. What could Seven Wonders Duel have done better? Greg.
So even though I just said it improved on everything, pretty much everything that Seven Wonders, the original, did, it's more interactive. The military is better. I don't know that it goes quite far enough for my taste. In that, yes, it's not super random, but it is random enough that sometimes I just don't care. I mean, it's just sometimes I have one card to choose. Sometimes when the cards flip over a certain way, it's just, well, I couldn't have done anything about that. I gave my opponent a good choice, or I have no good choices. So there is a significant dose of randomness in the game. That's not necessarily my cup of tea. Now, it's a short filler, so it's easily overlooked, but just note that that's there. And again, it's improved the interaction of Seven Wonders, but it's still not quite where I like it to be. It's not. It's still, at the end of the day, there's choices in a central board, and you're just it's choice denial at the end of the day. That's where the interaction comes from, which is cool, but it's not. It's midway there, I guess. It's still not quite as interactive as I look for. Another one is it's a little fiddly. You have 3 ages. That pyramid is cool, but you do have to set up that pyramid every time, right? I mean, and that takes a while. So for a game that's so light and short, that's a little bit of your game time there, just setting up the pyramid. So do note that. And at the end of the day, I said there was like one aspect where it clearly was not better than Seven Wonders, even though it is in most ways. It's player count. I mean, let's face it. Seven Wonders plays 3 to 7 players. That's a pretty wide player count that I really enjoy. Seven Wonders Duel plays 1 player count, plays 2 player only. Now, I love 2-player games. Most of my games I play are 2 players, so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But just, that's, I think, a very obvious place where this is not as good.
Although, I mean, to be fair, it seems harsh to sort of penalize it for that, because you know that going into it that is what it's trying to be. And
sure, and it's not a negative per se, and I don't even know if
I understand. I understand what you mean. In the whole wide world of all possible board games, it's not as versatile as other games might be.
Yeah, I guess we spent this whole time talking about how much better this is than the original Seven Wonders.
Mm-hmm.
That I had to come up with one thing that isn't better at, and this will matter. I'm gonna save some stuff for my final thoughts review part. Mm-hmm. You'll see why I talked about that here.
Okay. All right, Eric. What about you? What do you think Seven Wonders Duel could have done better?
Yeah, so as you talked about the distinction between judging this by every single board game in existence versus what it's intended to do, I think that's excuse me. I think that's a valid thing to bring up. The difference between judging it between everything, all games in the world, and what it's intended to do. I think that's valid. It's a valid thing to bring up, because if I was to judge this game by every game in existence, no, it's not going to rate in my, it's not going to rate as one of the greatest games of all time, just because I prefer to play big, sprawling, Ameritrash, just tons of rules, like let's get into the weeds kind of games. I love stuff like that, and I also like really elegant games, but I tend to like things that are somewhat different than this, more involved. However, I don't think it's fair to judge it in that comparison. So when you judge it according to itself, it does things really, really well. I do agree with Greg that I think the science and the military, they fixed both of those things to a certain degree, but they are still underpowered, and they're underpowered due to the randomness of the game. I think that if you have to really dig for something to nitpick on, it is a little fiddly to set up, but it's not terrible. My biggest problem with this game is not that it fits only 2 players, because I think, like you said, that's what it's intended to do. My biggest problem.
Yeah, you don't have very many friends, so.
That's exactly right. Like one of you is not my friend. So
Yeah.
that's
I hope it's me. Please say it's me.
my biggest problem is this. See that little symbol there? What's that mean? What is that? What is that? So what do you think, Micah, having never played this game before, that little symbol could possibly mean? A bunch of gray.
Something
No.
about you can't use the 4th card that you drew.
Yeah, well, who knows? How about this?
I don't know.
Like, how about that? Like, here's a green card with an up arrow and a down arrow, and a coin and a victory point symbol. What's that mean?
It means something having to do with I think.
Who knows?
With a diode.
Here's one. It's a 6 with a gray card pointing to another gray card with a 4 on it. What's that mean? Or here's an X gold symbol that's pointing down. Ooh, with all of the resource symbols.
Okay.
So it's like, yes, they've got stuff in the game that like explains what all that stuff is, but it's like
Not
as
intuitive.
you're playing it, the iconography in it is so like you've got to really go, okay, what am I buying? Because it's not always intuitive, and there's enough of those cards to make it kind of fiddly.
Yeah, that's a good point. I thought about that and I forgot to put it on my my list here. But yeah, I agree. Hieroglyphics, as we call them. I think and I think I brought that up in the original 7 Wonders review too. So that it carries over to here. It's not. I think once you play it a few times, they start to become a little more intuitive. But I agree. If you haven't played this game in a few months, there's just a certain. It kind of like just clogs up the gears of the game a little bit, because you have to look it up. Like, oh, what does that do again? Oh, I forgot that does that. Like when we played this game this week, Eric trashed me our first game because I forgot what that little recycle icon means. You get an extra turn. And I was like, I remember looking at these wonders and going, what does that little icon mean? I forgot. I'm like, well, I don't want to worry about it. I'm just going to draft a different wonder. And so Eric got all of those wonders with that icon on it.
Got every single one.
He got every single one with an extra turn. Like, oh, it's an extra turn? Oh, man.
One of my turns was 4 turns long.
Like, maybe I should have looked up that icon.
Yeah.
So that's just one example. Yeah, I agree that. But I played Race for the Galaxy, so I'm used to hieroglyphics. But it is.
It's not terrible. It's not terrible. I rate this game an 8.
Mm-hmm.
In my crazy rating system, which my crazy rating system is. It's like a 5 is actually average, as opposed to the BGG where 7 and 8 is the average.
Right.
So when I give this game an 8, it means it's really, really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
But there are just a couple of those things, and the iconography is one of them.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead then and get into the concluding thoughts then. Eric, you talked about your rating. Anything else, Eric, that you want to say about it that you haven't said, as far as would you recommend it? And we're going to have to talk about whether or not 7 Wonders Duel is going to kick something off of our 10-game shelf. So get your thoughts on that. I already know you want it to kick off Ticket to Ride. Other than that, what do you think?
So other than Ticket to Ride.
Right.
Well, my final thoughts on the game are, this is a great 2-player game. Probably one of the best 2-player games that I can think of. It does fit into that filler thing too. So if you want to get a nice filler game that you can pop out and play with a buddy while you're waiting for other people to show up, this is a great option for that as well. I would recommend it pretty much for anybody. I think it's one of the better games that I've purchased in the past few years. I think that as much as I would love to kick off Ticket to Ride,
Yeah.
I think the obvious fit here is that this game just is all around better than 7 Wonders. And since we have other bigger games that can accommodate more people, I would say the obvious bump here is the original 7 Wonders.
Okay. Are you recommending a bump? Or are
Yes,
you
I
just
would keep. I would definitely keep this over
the
Seven
original
Wonders.
Seven Wonders? Okay. All right. Greg, your final thoughts. What is your rating on it? Would you recommend it? And what do you think of bumping it or bumping Seven Wonders and keeping Seven
Yeah.
Wonders Duel?
So for me, it's I want to spend a little more time on the final thoughts than I normally do because I want to reiterate my rating system again to explain the craziness that's about to follow.
Okay.
So just as a clarification, my 8 to 10s, and I want to talk about the top end. My 8 to 10s are games that, in a perfect world, where I can pick any players in any situation to play with. These are the games that I want to play if I'm choosing 100% selfishly. Seven Wonders Duel is not there. Okay, so it's not in that slot. Where it does slot in is the 6 to 7 slot, which for me, this is, can I think of a situation where I have people over and I think, oh, this is a good fit for this person, right? So Seven Wonders Duel is in there. It's a 6.5 for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I wanted to prep all that up is because I gave the original Seven Wonders a 7.
Mm-hmm.
And yet this whole time I've been saying this is better than the original Seven Wonders. So I need to explain that. In my original Seven Wonders review, I said that if Seven Wonders itself was just a 4-player game and we took turns, it would be a 5.
Mm-hmm.
But the sheer fact that it could play so many players so quickly got it up to a 7 for me. Because there's not a lot of games that can play 6, 7 players in a half hour. So therefore, I can think of tons of situations where I'm like, oh yeah, Seven Wonders will fit here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a meaty enough game that can play this many players, and so I would say Seven Wonders Duel, though, as a 2-player game, is a ridiculously crowded field. There's so many 2-player games out there. So even though it's lower than Seven Wonders for me, rating-wise, I would say it gets there more naturally. It gets there on its own merits
Mm-hmm.
because it's doing it within a crowded field, and that's how my rating system works. It's based upon how often do I think this is going to get played, or how often will I want to play this game. As far as kicking things off, I think me and Eric are really approaching this shelf in a different way.
We are,
Well, I was
and I
gonna
think
say-
that's a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing that it's become apparent that I think we'll have to either work out on or off camera, whichever you guys want to do, is what is the shelf supposed to be, right? Because it's one thing to say the shelf represents the 10 games that I like the best. It's another.
No,
it's
that's
another.
not what this is.
It is another thing to say it represents a broad cross section of different types of games that could exist. It's another thing to say it represents the most versatile game shelf I could.
Well, I'll tell you what it
Any
represents.
arbitrary group that you might stick me with.
I'll tell you what it represents. It represents
Mhm.
it represents Greg and I living together, or living more aptly in a prison cell,
Yes.
where we are granted 10 games.
Mhm.
I don't even see it that way. Me
It
and
is
you,
because we are very different about what we're the way we're approaching this, and so we're having to compromise. And I think that that's kind of cool
No, I do too.
because people find themselves in this kind of situation.
I agree. But just to really clarify why I see it as, we don't necessarily have to be in a prison cell. I have a 10-game shelf
No,
back
I think
here.
it's necessary.
It's necessary.
I have a 10-game shelf back here, and Eric has the same 10-game shelf. That's it, in his place and my place. So in our current situation, where we have our normal gaming life, we have to we can only buy certain 10 games, and we have to agree which ones they are. So for the reason why Seven Wonders, even though I don't think it's an amazing game, but the reason why I think it's going to hold its place on the shelf for a while is simply because if you want to play something that's a little meatier than Codenames and you got 6 or 7 players over, we have nothing on the shelf. You know what I mean? It's like Codenames are nothing at that point. And sometimes
how many does King of Tokyo play?
King of Tokyo was a 5.
Okay.
And so that's the thing I like about Seven Wonders. It's just such a huge player count, 3 to 7. That to me. So when I think of these shelves, that's why I say I think we approach this differently. I think about how many opportunities are there to play this game. This shelf, not at all, not even remotely, represents my favorite games. I don't think of it that way. I think of it situations that arise. Will I have a game to pull out in this situation?
And
for
I'm
that
kind of
reason alone,
middle ground.
Yeah, for that reason alone, a 2-player game is going to have a hard time if it's a 2-player only game.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I'm approaching this from kind of a middle ground. I'm trying to accommodate that viewpoint because I think it's a valid place to be. but I also and I think I'm giving more weight to my personal feelings on the game than you are. And personally, I think that this is an 8 is really high in my
Yeah.
rating system. So I think this is a really fun game. I enjoy this game every time I play it, and I don't get. I understand the player count thing, but I don't care about other people's feelings.
I know, but here's the thing. I'll say this already. There
go ahead.
are 2-player games that I would say definitely should be on the list because I love them so much. I think me and you can think of a 2-player game right now that's going to come up eventually.
Obviously.
That we're going to say is going to be on the shelf.
Churchill.
So I'm not saying that 2-player games 2-player games should not be on the shelf. But I think it's very clear. You give this an 8. I give this a 6.5. That you love this much more than I do.
Much more.
So you know what I'm saying. For me, the difference between me playing this and Seven Wonders isn't high enough for me to want to go. But here we go. Sure. We've already talked about off camera.
We've talked about how to handle this. So
how to handle these types
I definitely want Seven Wonders Duel on the shelf.
Okay. So what are you willing to offer me? Is we've decided that we'll set up a game of compromise. That I will offer you a game, and this is the one that you have to kick off if you really want Seven Wonders.
I feel like I know what you're going to say.
I'm going to say Dominion.
That's fine.
Because for me, Dominion is a 2-player game, mostly 2-3-player game anyways.
Yeah.
I would rather play Seven Wonders Duel than Dominion. Yeah. So
I actually worked. I manipulated you, knowing that you would say Dominion, and
what?
I've undersold you. So like, what I really wanted to get rid of was Dominion.
That's
not really. I like Dominion a lot, and I'm sad to see it go. But I think Seven Wonders Duel belongs on the shelf more than either Dominion or Seven Wonders. I just thought that we could reach. So I half expected this answer from you, but I thought we could reach an agreement based on the fact that there's so much crossover with Seven Wonders and Seven Wonders Duel.
Yeah,
I understand your position. I understand.
I'm not happy with both of them being on the list, which is why I didn't want this on the list, to be honest with you.
Gotcha.
You know, because it's like it feels like now we got 2 games that are just kind of the same, but one plays 2-player.
Sure.
That's why I was didn't want it on the shelf. But, you know, like I said, that's how we're going to break ties.
I really like
compromise.
it. I really like this game, and I think it belongs on the shelf. So,
and I understand I got to compromise.
Dominion. And Greg, I think you've been. It seems like it's kind of been in the bag for Dominion, as it seemed to be for Ticket to Ride. Like, you know, you were going to say goodbye to Dominion at some point.
I think Ticket to Ride is going to be around for the long haul.
Just to address Ticket to Ride, because I was prepared for Ticket to Ride, actually. I'm 100% willing to let it go because I know this is our shelf. I recognize this is me and Eric's shelf. Yeah. And so I know Ticket to Ride is not in it for the long haul. My only thing with Ticket to Ride is if we're going to replace it, it's got to be replaced with something similar weight and player count. Because we don't have many super light gateway games on the list, on our shelf. And I feel like we need one of those at least. And right now, Ticket to Ride is kind of holding up that that position. So the first time we get a game that's like, hey, this is even 4-player and it's super lightweight, it's gone. I reckon.
Campaign for North Africa.
Yeah, as soon as we review that.
As soon as we review Campaign for North Africa, then Ticket to Ride obviously is off.
That's our super lightweight game.
Right. Nice. Okay. Cool. So if you are stuck at home during the pandemic with a fellow world conqueror and you guys have nothing to do, go ahead and check out Seven Wonders Duel. Sounds like it's a lot of fun, and it is going to go onto our 10-game shelf. And so long, Dominion. What are we going to be looking at next week, guys?
It's going to be 2 weeks from now.
Scythe.
Yeah.
Scythe. Okay, Scythe, and we'll get some nice pictures from Eric and all the Scythe paraphernalia that he has bought over the years.
Much
love
has gone into my Scythe box.
All right, cool. All right, so until then, please do remember to subscribe, like, and leave us a comment. Tell us if you played Seven Wonders Duel, what you think of it, if you think it deserves to be on the shelf, or if you think that Dominion should have stuck around. And until then, this has been a piece of the action.
Well, I can cross off 2 of those names right away, right? Chapel was a nurse, right? And then Grayson, that was Spock's mom, I believe.
So didn't... Oh, no. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of... who was in Deep Space Nine, the O'Brien's wife, Keiko.
Keiko. Yeah.
She was a botanist, wasn't she?
She
I
was
don't
a
think it was
xeno.
Keiko O'Brien.
No, it wasn't Keiko O'Brien, but yeah, she was like
Pretty
a
sure it wasn't.
xenobiologist or something like that,
Yeah.
Okay.
and a school teacher for some reason.
Yeah. So
But-
Christine Chapel, that was the main gal on.
That was a Majel.
Nurse, yeah, Nurse
I'll
Chapel.
say
and then Andy
the
Bracewell was his
Layla
mom.
person.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with C. I don't even know what episode this is. Do you remember this
Me neither.
episode? Spock
Nope.
gets with a botanist. And I don't.
And
I'm
then
gonna go
later
with C.
reconnects with him. Okay. C. Layla Kailomi.
Layla
Give it a
Kylami.
shot. That is correct. I guess we'll have to look up and see what that's all about. I
Pardon
vaguely
our-
remember something about how it starts off. It's the episode starts with them reconnecting on the planet, and then like through the course of the episode, I think this is how it works. Through the course of the episode, it kind of like is revealed that he had a thing with her.
I don't know. I feel like we're gonna need to switch to newer Star Trek shows because I feel like we're disappointing our Star Trek audience here.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
even knowing,
seriously.
not even knowing the episode that we're talking about.
Well, like the one from last week, it was the one with the iMorgs and the big, huge, long story, and this one was
Right.
just like look, it's one of those ones where you know it or you don't, right? Like there's
Yeah.
nothing to figure out. It's just like, what was the name of this one person one time?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So, but nevertheless, we were victorious.
We carry on. We
Yeah.
carry on.
We got it right, so that's all that matters.